Good evening, Tucson. Welcome back. Isn't it great to be together again? Welcome to the Authors Table Dinner and America's Best Book Festival. I'm Steve Alley, chairman of the festival's executive board. On behalf of the Tucson Festival of Books, the executive board, the steering committee, and its more than 1,600 volunteers, we're glad you're here to join us in reveling in all forms of literature. After 2 very long years, we are excited to be back together again. We would be remiss tonight if we did not mention 2 authors, though, who could not be with us, Tim Mack and Jacob Soboroff, who were scheduled to be with us this weekend, but instead are in Ukraine, reporting on the country's fight for freedom. Our thoughts are with them and the people of Ukraine. Over the years, the festival has grown to be the 3rd largest book festival in the country. Moreover, if you talk to the authors, I think they will tell you that this is the best run, author-centric literary event anywhere. Wow, what a success. To our authors who make the Tucson Festival of Books the literary bestseller, we're delighted that you are here with us this weekend. You are all rock stars in Tucson and truly are among friends and fans. We hope you enjoy the festival as much as we enjoy having you. And to the book lovers who support this educational community experience, your ongoing involvement, passion, and investment for the written word ensures that Tucson is the city that reads. Over the previous 12 years, the festival has hosted over 5,000 authors, participating in more than 4,000 presentations. After a 2-year hiatus, we're excited to be in person and present an incredible list of author sessions, exhibitors, and entertainment. And the best part is, after tonight, it's all free. With us tonight to present a special award is John D'Orlando, publisher and president of the Arizona Daily Star, member of the festival executive board, and representing one of the festival's 3 primary sponsors. John?
Thank you, Steve. The Arizona Daily Star appreciates the opportunity to be involved in a special event that brings hundreds of outstanding writers to Tucson and is committed to improving the lives of children and adults alike. Tonight, it is my privilege to recognize Debbie Shively. Debbie, please come on up. Debbie, who recently retired as the Senior Associate Director at the University of Arizona, including Director of the University Bookstores, has been instrumental in the growth and enhancement of the festival. Debbie's interest in the festival goes well beyond her position at the U of A. She is passionate about the festival and understands its mission, from creating new programs to identifying and resolving issues, to sourcing and selling authors' books, to bringing characters to life during the festival. Debbie has boosted the event and lifted up our community. Thanks, Debbie, for your contributions to literacy and education in Tucson, and please accept this small memento from the festival.
Thanks, John, and congratulations to Debbie as well. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Tom Mcnamara. Tom is a television broadcasting veteran with over 40 years of experience. He's the host of Arizona Public Media's award-winning news magazine, Arizona Illustrated. Prior to joining AZPM, Mcnamara served as the anchor of the 5, 6, and 10 p.m. newscast on KVOA News 4. Over the course of his award-winning career, Mcnamara has reported from around the world, including Kuwait, where he spent 1 month chronicling the post-war oil fires and the crews that battled them. Please welcome Tom Mcnamara.
picture from when I was young. Been a few years. Thank you very much, Steve, and thank you all, and welcome back to the Tucson Festival of Books. We are back and better than ever. The tents have sprung up like spring flowers on the mall. Our temperatures are going up very spring-like this weekend, and our spirits are up. So get set for a warm and wonderful weekend. And thank you once again for being a part of this. A lot of familiar faces, and it's great to see all of you. A quick note before we begin, there's a certain basketball game going on this evening, and we've all been sort of sworn to secrecy. If you have a line on the game, it is requested that you more or less keep it under wraps, the score and all. A lot of folks here want to go home. My wife is recording it for me. I'm going to stay in the dark till I get home tonight. So if March Madness is one of your passions, we'll all agree to keep it on the down low. Okay, no scores slipping out. And go Cats, above all. You know, the festival is one of our favorite events. It's just head and shoulders for this community. One of the most epic events of the year. It brings attention here, but it brings all of you and puts us on a very nice plane nationally and internationally, and we are so grateful for the success of the festival over the years and what you've all brought to it. 2 challenging years, and here we are again. And every year, of course, thousands of people, the attendance here is wonderful, await you, the authors, and the event itself in general. We're grateful to have 287 authors participating at the festival. And 90 of them, the hungry ones, are with us tonight. And we're glad you could be. Some good food awaits. And we know you enjoy the live audiences and the give and take and all, and I think you're going to see a level of enthusiasm this year pent up because we haven't been around for a couple of years. There's a whole new generation of book lovers out there, and they're very, very important, and they experience all different kinds of literature, and I want you to take a look at a cartoon on the screen. It might not be uncommon to see a site like this. Where do you put the batteries? Or for a parent explaining books in this manner, just consider it a long text message. The reality is it just doesn't matter if we can just get the kids to read, not just to read, but to love reading, because how it enriches their lives, what it can do for their lives and their careers and their relationships. I recently came across an article by Joe Pinsker. Studies have found kids who grow up surrounded by books, and you probably know this, tend to attain higher levels of education, and they're generally better readers than the kids that aren't exposed to that. It's very important. Leisure reading is linked to a range of good academic and professional outcomes, and in this article, Mario Russo is quoted as saying, "You don't need a lot of money to fill your home with books, and you really don't. And it's very hard to have a bored child when there are always books around." She referred to reading as a private pleasure delivery system, which seems like a key way to think about getting the kids to read. And by the way, that's why we love the Tucson Festival of Books, no doubt. It's all about reading, literacy, education, and paying tribute to the writers. And something special tonight, it's not often we have a gifted writer who's also a songwriter and a lead singer in a successful band that tours around and sounds great. Willie Vlaughton, best-selling author of Motel Life, North Line, Lean on Pete, Don't Skip Out on Me. These all sound like songs, not just books. As well as his latest novel, The Night Always Comes. Willie, that sounds like a song too. Lean on Pete was made into a widely acclaimed movie starring Charlie Plummer and Steve Buscemi. And Willie and his bands have released 11 albums. Where do you find the time? Tonight he'll be singing an original song. And Willie, we're glad you're here, so take it away.
Thank you. Well, I've always had a crush on Tucson. As a kid, I was thinking about it today, and it was Alice doesn't live here anymore. Might have started it. There was a band called Green on Red that was from here initially. Calexico, Giant Sand. I loved it here. I loved it, those records so much that I made my band come down here and we blew a bunch of money recording a record here. And then I started figuring out, well, I'll start having my characters get lost so they can end up in Tucson. So I did that. And then I drove down to Douglas, Arizona one day, and I went to the Gadsden Hotel. Now, the Gadsden Hotel, to me, is the most beautiful place I'd ever been in. It's like John Huston and David Lynch got together and built a hotel. And then I went into to have breakfast at this little diner connected to it, and the two weirdest old guys were there. And I said, I want to live there. So I had to stay the night, so I stayed the night, and the whole night I'm thinking, well, I could get a divorce and live there, or I could not. And so I like my wife just like a hair more than I like the Gadsden. So I drove away and I said, well, I have to write a novel just so I can live at the Gadsden for a couple years in my mind. And there's a lot of better writers than me, but like I couldn't figure out how to make a novel work where all I wanted to do was live at this weird hotel with some weird old guys. So I spent 2 years writing this book that didn't go anywhere, but I got this one song out of it, and I'll play it for you now. He sold off our horses to some guy in Arizona. But Whitey and me couldn't get them back, 'cause we were flat broke. I hated him for what he'd done to us, but I knew he was in a bad way. Heard he ended up in Douglas, holed up at the Gadsden Hotel, and he shot all that money away. He fell apart in his underwear in the lobby, crying for his sister who hadn't been alive in years. But don't write him down. Oh, don't write him down. Never seen the reason why to kick someone who's so torn up inside. But the place folded. We never got paid. Then we ran into him outside of Winnemucca when we were all down, auto moving hay. He broke down crying about what he'd done to us. He said he carried it around like a growing weight. Had a tattoo on his hand. It read, I've stole more than I ever gained. He was drunk in the morning. He gave us his watch, some drink toast, and walked off the job and just drifted away. But don't write him down. Don't write him down. seen the reason why to kick someone who's so torn up inside. Oh, don't write him down. You know his name, it means nothing now. Never seen the reason why to kick someone who's so torn up inside. Thank you very much.
Willie Vlaughton. Willie, nice job. Thank you. Nice tune. And if you haven't been to the Gadsden Hotel, it's worth the trip. See those two old guys hanging around when you get down there. All right, 2 years ago, 2 short years ago, or was it really 2 long years ago, it feels like, about 140,000 people, Southern Arizonans and visitors, came to the Festival of Books. And we are expecting a large crowd this weekend. The weather's going to be perfect. It's going to be just a beautiful spring Tucson weekend. But it's not just the attendance, it's the authors, the details, the volunteers, the hospitality, the venue, all of that. What an amazing job of just pulling it all together and creating a super festival. And tonight we have some folks I'd like to recognize among us in the crowd. Among them, former U.S. Congressman Ron Barber. Ron, wherever you're hiding, Ron and I sat together at an event yesterday. It's good to see you again, Congressman. Our Mayor, Regina Romero. Regina, I saw you earlier pointing to her. Thank you for joining us tonight. Actor A. Martinez of Longmire fame is with us and will be presenting with Craig Johnson in the ballroom. Thank you for being here. Also, Ruth Dickey. Ruth is the executive director of the National Book Foundation that presents the coveted National Book Awards every year. The festival is honored to have her and several, actually, of the 2021 National Book Award honorees with us this year, and they include Jason Mott, winner of the National Book Award, with his book, fiction, Hell of a Book. What a hell of a title. A hell of a book. Great title. Laird Hunt and Robert Jones also, and we have National Book Award nonfiction finalists Lucas Basir, Grace Cho, and Nicole Eustace among us tonight. Thank you for being here, and congratulations to all of you. The festival would also like to welcome some of our past Founders Award recipients. J.A. Jantz, local talent. J.A., good to have you. Billy Collins. Luis Oria. I know where you're hiding, Luis. And T.C. Boyle. Thank you all for once again being a part of this event. Also want to say hello to mystery writer Thomas Perry, who has been to every festival. So this would be number 13, if my math is correct. Thank you all for playing a role in our success here with the Tucson Festival of Books. And right now, I'd like to have you enjoy a short video of some memorable moments from the festival over the years. This is a good one.
I have often said to many of you in this room that the stars were aligned in this project. By partnering with the University of Arizona, the U of A bookstores, the Arizona Daily Star, we were on our way and we never looked back.
I'm so proud of Tucson because for once, you all look like one gigantic New Yorker cartoon. When do we eat? He's not funny. When will he shut up? I'm here just to hear Jance.
In 1964, they wouldn't allow me in the creative writing program because I was a girl. And so it was really wonderful in 2000 when they gave me an honorary doctorate of humane letters.
One picture is worth 1,000 words. You give me 1,000 words and I can give you the Lord's Prayer, the 23rd Psalm, the Hippocratic Oath, a sonnet by Shakespeare, the preamble to the Constitution, Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, the last drafts of Martin Luther King's speech to the March on Washington, and the final entry of Anne Frank's diary. You give me 1,000 words, I wouldn't trade you for any picture on earth.
Sports writer is the only occupation in journalism that I know of which is one word. It's as if the subject can't be separated from the journalist. Sports writer, one word. Everything else is two words. And it's often, or most often, it's not the stars who are the best people to write about at all. The stars are young. Nothing much has ever happened to them.
What I think this place is really about is right here tonight with us. TFOB is what it's about. All of us together, celebrating art, celebrating words, looking out for each other, and remembering we're a family.
This is before 24-hour news networks, okay? I would go upstairs, watch the 11 o'clock news, and if something struck me as funny, it would be on Weekend Update a half hour later. Writers, I didn't realize it at the time because I thought the whole world worked like that. And it was actually 2 times when I was with that show. While they were on the air doing Weekend Update, I was underneath the desk writing jokes and handing it up to them.
I came here because I was an inveterate bookworm. I'm an English major. I'm a book addict. I can't go into a bookstore without buying 3. I read all the time. It's the only thing I really want to do. In fact, I would rather be home reading tonight than to be here having to talk to you.
Books live and change as we grow, and what we get out of them continues to change as well.
Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of thought, they're all inextricably linked and essential to our way of life. And books are the affirmation of that idea. And this book festival is an affirmation of that idea.
I want to say to the writers, first and foremost, thank you for telling your stories, for giving us a way to walk through the world, for giving us a way out of no way.
This is one of the books that's coming out from Versify. This is for the unforgettable, the swift and sweet ones who hurdled history and opened a world of possible. The Muhammad Alis, the Althea Gibsons, the Jesse Owens, the Jordans and the LeBrons, the Serenas and the Cheryls, the Nana Kwames, the Wayetu Moores, the Reese Whitleys and the undiscovered. This is for the unbelievable, the we real cool ones. This is for the unbending, the black as the night is beautiful ones. This is for the underdogs and the uncertain, the unspoken but no longer untitled. This is for the undefeated. This is for you and you and you and you and you. This is for us.
Before we proceed, a word of thanks to our audiovisual people and to our staff serving the meal tonight, doing a wonderful job. Friendly, efficient, and ferocious. Thank you all so much for contributing to this event. And now it's my pleasure, my real pleasure, to welcome the festival's steering committee co-chairs, Lindy Mullinex and David Nix.
J.D. Salinger wrote, "What really knocks me out is a book that when you're done reading, you wish the author that wrote it was a terrific friend of yours, and you could call him or her up on the phone whenever you felt like it. That doesn't happen much, though." The Author's Table Dinner gives you that unique opportunity to meet and talk to your favorite authors and is the start to a special literary weekend. Heather Kane and Shauna Henderson, along with their committee members, made sure that the Author's Table Dinner continues to be a Tucson favorite. Great work. This literary celebration would not happen without the dedication of the steering committee members, Executive Director Melanie Morgan, Literary Consultant Lynn Weesey Sneed, Marketing Director Megan Reinold, and Office Coordinator Carla Chavez. Thank you for your dedication.
Hello. If you haven't been to the festival before, it's really hard to imagine. 267 authors, 268 presentations, 31 venues, 150 exhibitors, a literary circus, a children's area, Science City, the Flandreau Planetarium, food vendors, entertainment stages, and much more. So here's a quick look at the festival.
Our festival sponsors are dedicated to improving our community. The University of Arizona is the ultimate partner and the perfect environment for the festival. Thanks Dr. Robbins, Dr. Liesel Folks, Chris Kopak, Dr. Kathy Short, bookstore staff, and many others for their continued involvement. The Arizona Daily Star is an exceptional media partner, and their talented team, led by John DiOrlando, has spent countless hours producing a fabulous database, website, and apps, and instituting the ticketing process, publishing the festival guide, and hosting a venue on the UA Mall.
We're especially proud to have Tucson Medical. They are not only committed to the festival, but to many community projects and causes. Moreover, they have been a huge stabilizing factor during the pandemic. Make sure to visit their venue as you stroll the mall, and give thanks to Judy Rich and the entire staff of TMC Healthcare. We also want to thank the Stocker Foundation, U of A Bookstores, U of A Facilities Management, the Marshall Foundation, the William and Mary Ross Foundation, Pima County Public Library,
Arizona Appliance and Home, as well as all the other names you have seen on the scrolling video and in your program. Okay, there it is. And last but certainly not least, in addition to putting on a remarkable festival, we are equally proud that in the last 12 years, this festival has provided $2,100,000 to various community-based organizations to enrich literacy in Southern Arizona. That's really quite an accomplishment. So many of you have helped to happen.
Well, I'm sure we have a few memoir writers in the house, no doubt, and we'd like to share another clever cartoon with you. Writing a memoir not only takes a lot of thought, but it can be stressful, especially for parents. And if it reads, if you can't see it, if we had known that you were going to be an author, we would have been better parents. Our authors know what that's all about, for sure. Okay, now we get to some of the highlights of our night. And one of those highlights is my pleasure to introduce Bill Viner, co-founder of the Tucson Festival of Books. And Bill is here to present the 2022 Founders Award. Bill.
Good evening. Ernest Hemingway said, "There's no rule on how to write. Sometimes it comes easily and perfectly. Sometimes it's like drilling rock and then blasting it out with charges." Somerset Maugham said, "There are 3 rules for writing the novel." Unfortunately, no one knows what those rules are. And Elmore Leonard told us, "If it sounds like writing, I rewrite it. Or if proper usage gets in the way, it may have to go. I can't allow what we learned in English composition to disrupt the sound and rhythm of the narrative." Tonight, we honor and acknowledge the writers participating in the Tucson Festival of Books. They're the ones who bring words. Thank you. They're the ones who bring words and imagination to life. From Scott Simon to Jalissa Arce to William Kent Kruger, we are awed by the author's passion, talent, and achievements. Their wit, thoughts, and ideas are a wonderful gift to all of us. For those authors like T. Jefferson Parker, Carol Anderson, Craig Johnson, Lisa Genova, and C.J. Box, who are returning to the festival, we sincerely appreciate your support. And to the newcomers, like Padma Venkatraman, Phil Rucker, Elizabeth George, Carol Leone, and Tochi Unabuchi. We hope this is the first of many visits to Tucson and the festival. In 2011, the Tucson Festival of Books established the Founders Award. The award honors literary achievement that has captivated our imagination and whose body of work will be an inspiration to readers, writers, and book lovers. We continue to be inspired by the past honorees. Here's a short video.
the more you write, the harder it gets, because you don't want to write the same scenes over and over. You want to keep it fresh. I'm in my 80s and I still love to write.
One of the pleasures of being a novelist is the capacity to go backward and forward in time and see your characters and visit them at different times of their lives.
Last time I spoke at the University of Arizona was 35 years ago, and I spoke to 22 people.
I think the whole point of my career has been about getting kids to read, and that's what I'm most proud of. All I want kids to take away from these books is the fact that you can turn to reading and just be entertained.
Maybe you've heard me tell my all-time favorite letter. This was from a boy. Dear R.L. Stine, I've read 40 of your books, and I think they're really boring.
In some way, a good book is as exciting and rewarding as anything you're ever going to do in your life.
The previous winners of the Founders Award are all iconic authors, and two of them, Elmore Leonard and Larry McMurtry, are personal heroes of mine.
People who are really writers write when their lives are imperfect, because if you're waiting for perfection, you're never going to get around to writing at all.
It's a mad world we live in a world that is mysterious, undefined, without purpose. And I try to make purpose by making art.
I don't want to know the ending. I want to find out. I mean, this is why it's so exciting to me and why I only write fiction.
Poetry has become, it's probably the most egotistical of the arts, because the self is foregrounded and the self is the subject, the I.
When I was United States Poet Laureate, and I love saying that, it's a great way to start sentences.
First Latino to get the award. You know, I've watched this festival go through so many challenges. Political upheaval, ethnic problems, literacy upheavals, Jim Harrison. Jim was spectacular. So many things have happened. Weather, and here we are now.
Books and stories are a way for us to reach out into the world, to reflect, to escape. And again, I just want to say how grateful I am to receive the Founders Award. And I hope all of you stay safe and well, and that next year we can all be together again.
What a list. Tonight, we honor Annette Gordon Reed with the 2022 Founders Award. Annette Gordon Reed is the C.M. Loeb University Professor at Harvard. Gordon Reed has won 16 book prizes, including the Pulitzer Prize in History and the National Book Award for the Hemings of Monticello and American Family. In addition to articles and reviews, her other works have included Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, An American Controversy, Vernon Can Read, a memoir, and Race on Trial, Law and Justice in American History. Her most recent book is On Juneteenth. A selected list of her honors includes a fellowship from the Dorothy and Louis B. Coleman Center for Scholars and Writers in the New York Public Library, a Guggenheim Fellowship in the Humanities, a MacArthur Fellowship, the National Humanities Medal, the Frederick Douglass Book Prize, the George Washington Book Prize, and the Anisfield Wolf Book Award. Gordon Reed has been or is a member of the Council of Foreign Relations, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and the American Philosophical Society. Here's a tribute to Annette Gordon Reed.
If somebody had told me when I first started working on my first book about the controversy or the writings, the historiography about Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, that I would be standing here tonight so many years later talking about the same thing, I would have said you were crazy. As a historian, I researched the life of Thomas Jefferson and slavery at Monticello. I was concerned about the way the words of former enslaved people were treated. There was a tendency when they contradicted white people to believe the white people in the story. And so it was not just about Jefferson and Hemings or Jefferson, did he or didn't he not do it. It was a bigger topic to me. It wasn't just a man and a woman and did they have an affair. It was, how do you view the words of enslaved people in the writing of American history? And I thought that this was an area, this was a subject where I saw that there was a real problem. I was born in Livingston, Texas. I integrated our school district. I was the first black child to go to a white school in our school district. It was a profound experience, and it's not something that I've thought about it, but I probably haven't thought about it the way a historian should think about it. I've sort of turned myself to other people's lives and not my own. But it was a pretty formative and a kind of an amazing thing to do. I'm not sure that people say, well, that's a lot to put on a kid, but I suppose somebody had to do it. I knew that lawyers were at the forefront of that struggle, and it made it happen. And I thought law should be the profession that I should go into. I was a good student, I did well, I could go to law school, and I could make significant changes in the world. I learned to be a lawyer, I learned to think like a lawyer. I took the bar exam, became a lawyer, started practicing for a number of years, and it was enjoyable, but something was missing for me. I knew that there was something in the background that was making me unsatisfied about my life until that moment. I always wanted to be a writer. From the time that I was a child, I dreamed about going off to New York and writing the great American novel, living the life of a writer. One evening I had the great fortune to go see James Baldwin, who was my idol of all time, in New York, speaking in New York. And as I was standing in the line, having him sign my book, I was sort of telling him everything a mile a minute, explaining everything, that how I'd wanted to be a writer. And I said, it's too late. And he said, it's never too late. And that was what I needed to make me go on and continue writing. What I think history is exciting about history, done the right way, is to bring individuals alive, to talk about the Hemingses as individuals, not a slave girl, not a slave man or enslaved woman, but as people. You want to have their story. And I think it's important to do that for the nation. As I said, not so that we'll be hostage to the past, but so that we will know how to be useful for the future.
Please welcome Annette Gordon Reed. Annette, we're honored to present you with this Native American storyteller in honor of your many achievements. Congratulations. Very heavy, and it's fragile. Put it down.
Thank you all so much. I was so happy to be invited back here. I came in 2011 when the Founding Award was instituted. I didn't learn that until this evening, that's the origins of it. And I had a wonderful time here, my first time in Tucson. And I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad to be back to receive this award and to have all of your warm, very, very warm welcome. This is a dream for me, as I mentioned in the clips that were there. I always thought of myself as a writer when I was growing up. Didn't think it was so practical, that's why I ended up going to law school. But I couldn't stay being a lawyer when there were things that I wanted to do and stories that I wanted to tell. Fortunately, I had a mother who read to me every night, who instilled in me the love of reading. And from that, I wanted to create those books myself. I wanted to do all of those things myself. And with her encouragement and the encouragement of my father, both of my parents were readers, and they had in their home, in our home, we always had books. And I recall reading a book called White Over Black by Winthrop Jordan when I was about 12 years old. And that introduced me to serious history by a man who was not only a great historian, but a great writer, Winthrop Jordan. And that was my model in the back of my mind. I don't have a PhD in history, but it was from that book that I learned how to do history and the way to write and the way to present stories. And that's how I came to write the books that I have written about Monticello and about Jefferson, and introduced me to this new world of reading and writing and being a communicator to people at large, not just for myself, but to the world. And this latest book on Juneteenth is a departure for me because I go back and talk about growing up, and I talk in a very personal way about my life. I spend most of my life looking at other people's families, other family trees, and here's one where I talk about myself, and it's been a joy to do that. I'm so looking forward to tomorrow when I will be on 3 panels. One book talk, 3 panels, where I get to talk about the process of doing this and sort of opening up and writing in a way that's very personal and not what I typically do, and entertaining questions from people. I'm just so thrilled to see how large this festival has grown. I came from another festival this week, New Orleans. The weather is better here. And I'm so happy to be here and so grateful for this award. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow, and I hope you all come out and ask great questions of me. Thank you. Yes. Okay.
Let's give her another round of applause. Annette, your sessions will be full. There's no question about it. The festival is very, very proud to have Tucson Medical Center as its presenting sponsor. They're a terrific asset to our entire community. Here tonight is Dr. Amy Bider, Senior Vice President and Chief Medical Officer for Tucson Medical Center, to introduce our keynote speaker. A warm welcome for Dr. Bider.
Thank you and good evening. It is my pleasure to introduce tonight's keynote speaker. Viet Tan Nguyen was born in Vietnam and raised in America. He is the author of The Committed, which continues the story of the sympathizer, which was awarded the 2016 Pulitzer Prize in Fiction, along with several other awards. He is the author of the short story collection, The Refugees, the nonfiction book, Nothing Ever Dies, which was a finalist for the National Book Award, and is the editor of an anthology of refugee writing, The Displaced. He is the Errol Arnold Professor of English and American Studies and Ethnicity at the University of Southern California, and a recipient of fellowships from the Guggenheim and MacArthur Foundations. He lives in Los Angeles, and please let's give a warm Tucson welcome for Viet Tan Nguyen.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Dr. Bider, and good evening, Tucson. Like Annette Gordon Reed, I also came from another place, Dallas, and the weather is also better here. compared to Dallas as well. It's a thrill to be back here in Tucson, and I'm going to make my own pitch. Tomorrow I will be on a panel with founder Luis Alberto Urrea. Come out and hear us talk. All right. Meanwhile, it is an honor to be here before you, assembled readers, writers, booksellers, and most of all, lovers of books. I've had a love affair with books almost as long as I've had memory. Books in general, and literature specifically, were my first love outside of the love I had for my family. But while I didn't choose my family, I did choose books. And it was through books, literature, and storytelling that I found my voice, learned to speak, and began grappling with what it meant to speak for others. I wrote and drew my first book when I was in the 3rd grade in San Jose, California, around 1980. The students in my school were mostly Vietnamese refugees and Mexican and Latino immigrants, or the children of such immigrants. I had friends named Pablo, Benito, Duc, and Du. In the schoolyard, we Vietnamese boys formed rival gangs at a very young age. We flailed at each other harmlessly. I showed early signs of my trademark cowardice and hung back at the rear of our little gang. I'd already gotten into an after-school fist fight in the 2nd grade with a black boy named Marcus. We punched each other in the face for a minute or two, and afterwards wiped away the blood and shook hands. I don't think we even knew why we had fought in the first place. It would be my first and last fist fight, but not my last fight. As a writer, I would come to believe in Muhammad Ali's words, that writing is fighting. And in the 2nd grade, I'd already taken the first step in my training by spending most of my time with books and stories rather than with people. I was very good at being alone. I started wearing glasses in the 2nd grade, which my father blamed on me reading too much in dim light. But that reading had another effect. It fired my imagination, where I could see perfectly. So, when my 3rd grade teacher told us to write and draw our own books, I was ready. My book was Lester the Cat. Lester was an urban cat, stricken with ennui. Bored of city life, he fled to the countryside. There, in a hay-strewn barn, he found love with a country cat. Unexpectedly, the San Jose Public Library gave Lester the Cat a book award. My first taste of literary fame. I had never thought of being a writer before Lester the Cat, and I'm forever grateful to the San Jose Public Library for encouraging me and setting me on the path to over 30 years of misery trying to become a writer. My school librarian, a kindly white-haired woman, took me to the award ceremony. There was a hotel across the street from the library, and she treated me to a hamburger in the hotel restaurant, which was the fanciest place I had ever been in my 8-year-old mind. My family were refugees, and the only times we ever ate out were at a pho restaurant after Vietnamese language mass on Sundays. This was long before pho was fashionable. Decades before celebrity chef Rachel Ray would offend all Vietnamese people with her faux pho. Back then, the only people in this pho restaurant were Vietnamese, and the only language spoken was Vietnamese. We all ate pho the ambidextrous Vietnamese way, chopsticks in one hand, spoon in the other, surrounded by a hubbub of Vietnamese voices. The Pho restaurant was part of an international chain spread across the Vietnamese refugee diaspora. Years later, I heard rumors that the chain was funneling its profits to the remnants of the South Vietnamese army in exile, intent on taking back Vietnam from the victorious communists. San Jose was home to one of the largest populations of Vietnamese refugees in the world, and during our community celebrations like Tết, Vietnamese veterans in camouflage uniforms would guard the gates. We sang the South Vietnamese national anthem. And in the exhibition hall of the Tết Festival, I saw pictures of South Vietnamese guerrillas somewhere in a jungle, training to invade Vietnam. My parents were anti-communists too, but they were more intent on saving our lives than fighting wars. Saving our lives meant working themselves to exhaustion at the Saigon Mui, their grocery store in downtown San Jose. 12 to 14-hour days, almost every day of the year, which is why neither of my parents could take me to the library for my award. Now, this library, a massive white cube named after Martin Luther King Jr., was the biggest building I knew. It was also my second home, a place I felt more at home in than I did in my parents' home. We lived next to the entrance ramp of the 280 freeway in a house with iron bars on all its windows. When I was 16, a white male gunman followed my parents home from the Saigon Mui, broke into our house, and aimed his gun in all our faces. When he told us to get on our knees, I, the coward, silently obeyed, as did my father. My mother saved our lives by dashing past the gunman and running, screaming, into the street. I saw her through the living room window, but I couldn't hear her voice as she ran past all the cars heading for the freeway. My bedroom window had a view of this freeway entrance ramp, and that night, as I watched the stream of cars ascend the ramp, I wondered where they were going, and I wanted to go with them. The library offered me a way out. Inside the library was a world without borders for a refugee boy who had been forced to cross borders. Books could deliver me across time and space, away from the house with its barred windows, away from the Saigon Mui, where my parents had been shot in their store on Christmas Eve when I was 7. My brother and I were home alone. I was watching cartoons. 7 years older, my brother took the phone call. When he told me, I was speechless. My parents returned to work at the Saigon Mui within a day or two. They had to live, and to live, they had to work, and it was only flesh wounds. We never spoke of that incident again. So when my parents could not make it the next year to my award ceremony, who was I to say anything? They were working to save our lives, and not just ours, but all the relatives back in a starving Vietnam, including my parents' parents and my adopted sister. We had left her behind at age 16 by herself to safeguard the family property, which the victorious communists confiscated anyway. I had no memory of my grandparents or this adopted sister, whom I last saw when I was 4. Growing up in that house of barred windows, I was aware of absent presences, of ghosts, of missing persons, of the faces of my grandparents in black and white pictures looking at me without speaking. They all died before I could return to Vietnam and hear their voices. Part of me longed to hear the voices of the Vietnamese diaspora and the Vietnamese people, even as part of me didn't want to hear those voices. I had come to the United States at age 4, fluent in Vietnamese, and all these decades later, I am still fluent in Vietnamese at a 4-year-old level. My monolingualism, my linguistic infantilism, is one of the things that makes me an American. My resistance to Vietnamese came about because I grew up as an American, and my poor parents, aware that they were raising an American alien in their household, sent me to Vietnamese Catholic Sunday school, which was actually the quickest way to guarantee that I would never learn Vietnamese. Didn't want to learn Vietnamese by reading the Bible, and I did not want to listen to the drone of the priest. And yet I yearned to hear the voices of Vietnamese people because as an American, I understood how Americans saw and heard, or didn't hear, Vietnamese people. I watched almost all of Hollywood's Vietnam War movies, which is an exercise I recommend to no one, especially if you're Vietnamese. When Americans said Vietnam, they really meant the Vietnam War, but whether they meant the country or the war, Vietnam for Americans was an American drama, an American civil war, a conflict in the American soul in which we were the extras. It was strange that this was our country and our war, and yet our only place in American movies was to be killed, raped, threatened, or rescued. All we could do was scream, cry, beg, threaten, or curse, and if we could say anything at all, it was either "me love you long time" or "thank you for being rescued." Of course, we were never so rude as to mention, at least in English, that we wouldn't have needed to be rescued by Americans if we hadn't been invaded by Americans in the first place. The situation in the library was not much better. The books about Vietnam were mostly about the war and therefore mostly about Americans. There was a well-intentioned children's book about a Vietnamese refugee, but I didn't recognize myself in its world of rice paddies, water buffaloes, and half-naked peasant boys. I finally found the novel Blue Dragon, White Tiger by Duc Van Nguyen, a diplomat writing about the war from the South Vietnamese point of view, and perhaps the first Vietnamese writer to write fiction in English. He said, "I am a Vietnamese by birth and American by choice," and an echo of it must have stuck in my head, for decades later I would write, "I was born in Vietnam, but made in America." His novel put another thought in my head. We could write about our own experiences in English, an adopted tongue that felt like my native tongue. But almost all of my reading in this second home of the library was not about me or anyone who looked like me. Almost everything I read was by and about white people. And through those books and watching TV and the movies, which were also almost all about white people, I became an anthropologist of white people, knowing them far, far better than they knew me or people like me. It was natural, therefore, to become an English major in college. For reading in English was the one thing I was good at. Ironically, during my time at Berkeley, I read Chaucer's Canterbury Tales in Middle English twice, while I had to read Nguyễn Du's classic epic, The Tale of Giu, in translation from Vietnamese into English. If English had become just like my native tongue, it came at the expense of losing my mother tongue. Nevertheless, even though Berkeley's English department disciplined me into the canon by having me read the whole of English literature, from Beowulf through Shakespeare, the Victorians, the American Renaissance, and modernism, I hung on to this stubborn desire to hear the voices of Vietnamese people. When I continued at Berkeley to get a PhD in English, I decided to write a dissertation on Vietnamese American literature. But when I told this to the chair of the English department, a famous Americanist, he said, "No, you can't do that. You won't get a job." And perhaps in 1992, he was right. But if I were him, I would have said, "I want you to know you may not get a job, but I also want you to know that you should do what you want, as long as you understand that the world does not want to hear your voice. That's the world's problem, not yours." But he didn't tell me that, and I didn't have the courage of my convictions, so I wrote a dissertation on Asian American literature. 27 years later, however, I would have the opportunity to give a presentation to the Modern Language Association at the invitation of its president. My talk was on Vietnamese American literature. In those 27 years, Vietnamese American writers established Vietnamese American literature as an undeniable field, with books like Lê Thị Diêm Thuy's The Gangster We're All Looking For, Monique Jung's The Book of Salt, Andrew X. Pham's Catfish and Mandala, Ocean Vuong's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, and many others. In those 27 years, I also struggled to find my voice. In my English graduate seminars and later as a professor in English department faculty meetings, I barely said a word, feeling like an imposter and a trespasser. At home with my parents, I also barely said a word. The linguistic and cultural gap between us had grown very wide. I had told my parents I was going to become a doctor. Really? They said. An English doctor, I said. Their faces fell. How could I explain to my parents that I loved reading Jane Austen and the Romantics? And how could I explain that Asian American literature had saved me because it showed me that a writer could look like me and that I could look like a writer? The language my parents and I shared, Vietnamese, was a stunted one because of me. And yet, as stunted as that language was, the language that I had mastered, English, gave me access to the entire world because its speakers had mastered the world through invasion, enslavement, colonialism, warfare, and capitalism. Still, I dedicated myself to this complicated tongue, and after more than 30 years of misery, I did become a writer. My first novel, The Sympathizer, was unexpectedly successful. I say unexpectedly because it was rejected by 13 out of 14 publishers. As one editor put it in his rejection, I kept all the rejections. He just had too much trouble crawling all the way inside the voice. I understood why, especially given how I had spent a lifetime ever since my earliest days in the San Jose Public Library, crawling all the way inside the voices of so many white writers. When those white writers were writing, did they imagine that they would be speaking to a young Vietnamese refugee boy? Probably not. Was I nevertheless spoken to? Yes, because their voices were beautiful. And because I knew that if I wanted to survive in this country, I had to keep quiet and listen to these masterful voices. One lesson I learned intuitively was that all those white writers I read and admired didn't need and shouldn't need to worry about whether a young Vietnamese refugee boy was ever going to read them. That's not their obligation. Therefore, the lesson I had to learn consciously was that I, as a writer, who also happened to be a Vietnamese refugee writer and an Asian American writer, I didn't need to and shouldn't need to worry about whether non-Vietnamese people would read me. My obligation was not to care about whether anyone, white, black, or otherwise, could crawl into my voice. My obligation was to speak as if everyone could already understand what I said. That's an assumption a person of the so-called majority makes all the time. An assumption born from the privilege of being the beneficiary of imperialism, colonialism, racism, and patriarchy. It's an assumption that a person of a so-called minority may find hard to make. At least it was hard for me. To find my voice, I stopped thinking of myself as a minority, even though I still sometimes find myself to be the only Asian in the room. But I'm not a minority if I think of myself as being part of a world, a globe, where white people are the minority. I'm also not a minority if, when I write, I'm writing first of all to myself, because I contain multitudes. And I'm not a minority if I write to Vietnamese people. Everyone else can listen in. So the conceit of my novel, The Sympathizer, and if you haven't read The Sympathizer, shame on you. But the conceit of this novel is that it is a confession written by our Vietnamese narrator to his Vietnamese interrogator. If a Vietnamese person speaks to another Vietnamese person, there is no translation. If I were to write in the voice of our narrator, I would like a bowl of pho, comma, a delicious beef noodle soup, comma, then a sensitive reader would know that I am not talking to Vietnamese people. I would be translating for non-Vietnamese readers. People of the so-called majority, used to never translating themselves, used to always being translated to, might not notice this translation, this catering, this invitation to crawl inside the voice of the writer who has turned himself into a translator. But imagine how you would feel if Jonathan Franzen wrote, "I would like a sandwich, comma, 2 slices of bread, between which there's something delicious, comma." Franzen wouldn't do that. Franzen wouldn't translate because he assumes his audience knows what he's talking about, or should know what he's talking about. And that is the right stance to take. So, so-called minority writers, do not translate. And readers of so-called minority literature, do not expect or demand translation. Translation, at least within a book written by a so-called minority, is more often than not a deformation of the voice, the sign of the so-called minority accepting their subjugated status. For me, refusing to translate was crucial to denying subjugation, which was inextricable from finding and claiming my voice. Refusing to translate was also my way of refusing to be a translator for Vietnamese people to non-Vietnamese people, which was also a refusal to be the representative of Vietnamese people. Too often, so-called minority writers are expected to be the translators and representatives of their people, even when they're just writing fiction or poetry, a burden not usually placed on so-called majority writers. Given my refusal, it was a surprise, and yet not a surprise, that a major book review of The Sympathizer called me a voice for the voiceless. And I thought, have you ever eaten at a Vietnamese restaurant, visited a Vietnamese home, hung out with Vietnamese people? We're really, really loud. As Arundhati Roy puts it, there's really no such thing as the voiceless. There are only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard. I'll tell her you applauded that line. What does it mean then for someone to find their voice when they are told that their voice is heard so much more clearly against the voicelessness of those others who are just like them? Those who want to hear a voice for the voiceless may actually be just as invested in not hearing the cacophony and the chorus of those they assume to be voiceless. It's easier to hear just the one voice. This is one reason why I reject the notion of the writer as only being a solitary artist whose task it is to find his or her or their voice. Of course, much of the writer's work is solitary. During my 30 years of misery, I spent thousands of hours alone, facing a screen and a blank wall. But always present with me were the voices of all those Vietnamese people I knew and all the Vietnamese people I had encountered in movies and books. Always there for me were the voices of the Asian American writers who had come before me, beginning in the late 19th century, who faced a level of incomprehension I can barely imagine. And always with me were the voices of all the Asian Americans and other people of color whose political and social movements had broached the walls of racism and indifference and given me the chance to speak and to be heard. I think of W.E.B. Du Bois's idea that black people always see themselves through their own eyes and those of others. I experienced that double consciousness too, to some degree. I was an American spying on my parents and a Vietnamese spying on Americans. But double consciousness is also experienced not only through the gaze, but also through the voice. I may speak for myself and only for myself, but I am perceived as speaking for others whether I like it or not, whether I want to or not. Instead of accepting this duality in which the so-called minority writer ventriloquizes the voiceless as their voice, I believe in two things. First, we all indeed have to find our own voices. But second, we must abolish the conditions of voicelessness. For Asian Americans, even claiming an individual voice is fraught. For our place in this country is to be the silent, acquiescent, apologetic model minority. We are neither expected to write nor to fight. We are not expected to speak alone, much less speak together. And yet, in the face of the anti-Asian violence that is perpetual in American society and routine in American warfare in Asia, and which has resurged during the pandemic, finding and claiming both our individual and collective voices is crucial. And here, what is so powerful about literature and storytelling, as always, as art and as weapons, is that they can teach us not only how to be alone, but also how to stand together. Thank you, Tucson Festival of Books.
Nice to end on a high note. Yet, thank you for a great talk. Excellent. Annette, congratulations to you once again. And I will be happy to deliver your award to the table as we finish up now, which we will do. All we can say at this point is have a wonderful weekend. It's going to be great to be back out there. Thank you to the authors, the spouses, the support staff, the organizers, everyone who's making this event a success again for the 13th year in a row. Have a safe night. Enjoy as you're heading out. Make sure to pick up your Arizona Daily Star Festival Guide so you make it to your sessions tomorrow and you don't get lost. And enjoy. Welcome to Tucson. Welcome back.